Welcome to the show today. Today we're going to be talking about how to master seller financing in real estate. We have with us Miss April. She's a real estate investor. She has co-authored 3 books about successful habits in raising private money for real estate. Let's welcome Miss April to the show. How you doing, Miss April?
I'm good. Thanks for having me. I appreciate it.
Thank you for joining us. Thank you for joining us. So tell us, how did you get into real estate?
So I got into it because of my, at the time, then boyfriend, now husband, was into it. He owned 2 small properties and was always reading books about real estate. And he was a real estate agent. And I was in college to be the CEO of a hospital. I was in school for my master's degree and working in healthcare. I picked up a book, I read it, and just like couldn't believe what the book was telling me, that like someone else would live in a house for you and pay off the mortgage, meaning like tenants, and then you would get to keep the equity, and about growing wealth and all these people that had their own business in real estate. So I just started learning more and more, to the point that it led to me dropping out of my master's program and taking real estate classes and pursuing it full time. And our first deal, we had no money and no experience. So we teamed up with someone with more experience and did what you call like a joint venture, flipped a project, made more on that project than I probably made working in a hospital for like 4 months, all in one shot. And I was hooked and just started like learning more and more and trying to get better at it. And then when I was 35, I left healthcare and quote unquote retired into flipping houses full time and buying rental properties full time. And now that's what I do. We flip houses, we buy multifamily property, and we do private lending.
Oh wow, that's awesome. So before you got into it, were you a little afraid that this may be something that pulled more your attention away from what you were trying to do in the corporate world before you got that first big piece of the pie?
Um, Not really. I wouldn't say I made any major changes to my healthcare path until after I was consistently flipping houses. So once I was consistently flipping like 3 or 4 houses, which was enough to replace my income from healthcare, then I knew like, okay, now I can jump and go into real estate full time. But before that, I was still on the path of like loving healthcare and climbing the ladder in healthcare. And then once I was like, okay, I'm flipping houses, making more than what I could make working in healthcare with less stress, I think I'm going to leave.
I know that's right.
Yeah.
so, so now that you're in the real estate space, and you've been flipping houses, you're doing, investment properties, rental properties, and now that you're doing some private lending, what are the difference between multifamily, and residential real estate?
For me, I like both. I mean, they both have their pros and cons. We're definitely more multifamily geared right now. Um, buying larger multifamily gives us the ability to buy larger projects with a team. And I've just found that when I work with a team, you can go a lot further, a lot faster. You can build wealth a lot faster. So to take down like a $13 million project, there might be 5 or 6 of us that come together to take down that project, and we all have different strengths. So my strength is really raising money for projects. And then you have people who are really good at overseeing and managing the project. And you have people that are really good at the rehab process of the project. None of us is good at everything. So none of us would have been able to do that project on our own. So I really like multifamily just because of the team aspect. Like you're buying bigger, there's more fat in the deal. You can grow wealth faster, and you get to do it with people that you love working with, that balance you. So you don't have to be good at everything.
That is so true. That's kind of ironic because on yesterday I had another guest in the real estate business, excuse me, in Texas. I think Dallas, Texas area to be exact. And he said the same thing. He said no one partner knows everything, and you have to connect with people that know something, a little bit more than you in an area that you are not privy to. So if you're not really
Yes.
good at managing a project, but you're really good at networking and putting money together, you should do that part. And so
Right.
that's kind of good that you're saying that, because it's almost like confirmation of something that we need to hear, especially for those that gets first, when they first get into real estate, believing that they
Yeah.
can do every, parts of real estate investing, which is
Yeah.
something you do not want to do.
Yeah, and it'll take you forever. And people think they have to learn everything and become really good at everything. And I'm like, just focus on what you're really good at and become even better out of it, better at it, instead of like trying to be really good at everything, because that's a really slow way to scale, is trying to be really good at everything. You have to learn all those things. It's going to take you forever. It's going to take you forever.
That
And
is so
nobody
true.
nobody has time for that. Nobody.
Right.
I own a company called Lazy Girl REI, Lazy Girl Real Estate Investing. And everyone's like, but you're not lazy. I'm like, but I kind of am, because I don't want to learn everything. I just want to focus on what I'm good at, and let other people do the other stuff.
I love that. I really do. And I like the piece where you talk about seller financing, because I literally made a living on seller financing on the LBO side, leverage buyouts, and distressed businesses. That's how I started out in 2009 during the crisis.
Okay.
So tell us about that seller finance piece in real estate.
Yeah, I love seller financing. It's my favorite way to buy. I mean, we basically focus on small mom and pop sellers that have multifamily properties that they get burnt out. Like they're tired of managing tenants, or they're tired of doing repairs, or they're one of those I do everything myself. So they burn themselves out. They're trying to do all the repairs on the building themselves. So what we do is we just go in and basically give them options for selling, like, hey, we can buy it cash, or you can list it on the market. And when you sell, what are you going to do with that money from the proceeds of the sale? And most sellers are like scared to death about what to do with the proceeds, because people who are buying multifamily and growing wealth don't want their money sitting in a bank account. It's not making them any money there. So they're like, I don't know how to keep my money working, so I'm making a better interest rate. And that's a perfect segue into, you could hold the paper or seller finance. And I would, instead of making payments to a bank, I'd rather make payments to you. Like I'd rather pay you interest and help you out than help out a bank. And that resonates with people. And then you have owners that are getting principal and interest payments every month. I mean, I had a guy on a single family home that used that to pay a condo payment every month. I have a multifamily seller now that we're getting ready to cash him out of his seller finance. And he's so sad about it because he's like, I don't really have any need for the money. So I'm like, well, we can still use your money, but in a different project, but we're just cashing it out on this building. So it works out really well for them, way better than having money in a bank account. And it's a win-win for the buyer too, because for us on our end, with a seller, we're able to get like a 30-year amortization as opposed to a bank, which is going to give us a 20-year, which is going to make our payment higher. So we can kind of
Right.
stretch out our payments so our building cash flows better when we get a seller finance. So we're helping them, they're helping us. It works out really nice.
I was just going to ask you, what are the advantages and risks in seller finance? And you kind of pretty much, listed some of the stuff, especially with the amortization of stretching it out from 20 to 30, so you can kind of lower that payment in particular. But
Yeah.
what are some of the risks that comes with seller financing?
I would say more on the seller side, they worry about like how are they protected. So I just let them know you're just like a mortgage company. So you're in first lien position. You can file foreclosure on me. We can put stuff in the note which explains the terms of the deal, so that if you have to file foreclosure, we can speed up the process. And then they always worry about like, what if I die? Like if I seller finance this to you and I die, what happens? And it's like, I don't get to keep your money, but I have to start paying the estate instead of paying you personally, but the money will go to your family via the estate. So it's not like they stop getting paid or their family stops getting paid. So that's pretty much what they worry about. From my side of things, I just feel like the buildings we've seller financed, we've been pretty lucky. We have some sellers that get like emotionally attached to the building and some of the residents that live there. Like I have one now where an owner is like very much cares about one of the residents in the building, and he made me promise on a handshake that I would never raise his rent. So this guy's rent is probably like $300 below market, but I'm like, I'm not going to go back on my word. Like I promised on a handshake, and I got a good deal on the building. So this guy's rent, as long as he lives there, will forever stay at what it is now. You know, and I didn't have to do that, but it got me the deal. The guy was emotionally attached. I don't think he would have sold it to anyone else if they would have been like, oh, I can't do that, I have to raise rents. So they sometimes get a little emotionally attached to the building. And right now, a lot of sellers want like 5%, 6%, 7% interest rate, and they're doing it on a 30-year amortization, which is fine. But with the way interest rates are now, like why we're cashing one of our sellers out is because I'm like, okay, but I can go to a bank now and I'm going to get 3, so, or 4. So it's really not advantageous for me anymore. That 30-year amortization, I'd rather take like a 20-year at like 3.5%. So you really just have to watch like what the market's doing as well.
Yeah, that's so true. That is so true. But sometimes you're not going to get that great deal if you don't do a deal, even though you're going to
Right.
pay what 2, 3 more% in
Right.
interest.
Yep.
Um, so tell us, what is some of the best ways to put together a seller financing deal? So if you're going to finance a deal, what are some of the great ways to put a deal together? Should it be a certain number or percentage for down payment? How does that work?
So I really don't, you really have to know what's important to the seller. Like, and that comes in conversation and building rapport. So sometimes sellers are worried about how much money you're going to put down. Sometimes sellers are like, I just want my monthly payments to be X. Like I had a seller that was like, well, consistently I'm getting, he was a, should have not have been a landlord. He like was not collecting rent. He was collecting rent half the time. His tenants like ruled the building. So he was like, I'm getting consistently about 700 a month. So as long as my payments around that, he didn't care what the down payment was. He didn't care what he net in the end. He just wanted to make sure he was making 700 a month every month, and that was his payment. So what I do with seller financing deals is I draw up a spreadsheet and I have columns, and every column's a little different. One has a bigger down payment, one has a larger net, one has a larger monthly payment, a lower interest rate, a higher interest rate. And I meet with the seller. Most seller finance deals take me 6 months to a year to close. It's just building rapport and having a conversation with the seller. Now I'm talking about sellers that don't understand seller financing. People assume just because someone owns an apartment building, they know what seller financing is. Huge mistake, huge mistake. They don't necessarily know what holding the paper means or selling seller financing means. So I draw up a spreadsheet and I lay out all these different columns, and they all work for me, but to them, they're all different. So I want to know which one is most appealing to them, and then they tell me which is most appealing to them and then what changes they want made, and then I change the column based on that. So I'm giving them what they want while also getting what I want at the same time, but making it look like it's their decision. It's all going to shake out the same for me.
Right.
So there really is no like 10% down. Sometimes sellers will say, well, I want 25% down. And I always just come back and say, if I wanted to put 25% down, I would finance with a bank. But I don't want to finance with a bank. I want to finance through you because I want to help you. But in return, I don't want to have to put 25% down because that's something I'd have to do for a bank. So 10%, maybe 5%. I've put like nothing down, like 5,000 bucks, sometimes less, than gotten seller finance deals. So it's all about kind of like giving them all different options and having them pick.
Oh yeah, done that many times before. It works, and sometimes it doesn't, but it's all good. Yeah. So seller finance is one of those tricky things. I love it because for me, you actually build a rapport with the person that owns the building, right? So you get all the intimate details about the building when it first was built, how long it's been there, a little bit more than what you can find from just a search. You know what I mean?
Yes. Yep. Yeah.
And so I like that. That's why I love seller finance because you build that great rapport with them, and then at some time down the road, they become pretty much like your reference, if you will. So now when you want to go
Yeah.
and do another project with seller finance, say, hey, I did it over here with this guy. You should call him and ask him.
That
So
is such a good point. And I say that all the time. Every time I present seller financing, I say to sellers, I know you may have never done this before, but I've done this multiple times, and I will give you a reference list, and you can call all these people and ask them how it went. And then it's also like long-term relationships, sellers finance. And like the guy I have now, we're going to cash him out and get a loan with a bank. He doesn't know what to do with his money. He's like, I don't want my money sitting in a bank account. I'm like, that's okay, because we're buying larger multifamily. So you can like actually private lend that money, which is basically what you're doing now, but you lend it on flip projects or you lend it into multifamily syndications.
Awesome. I love it. I
Yeah.
love it. So tell us, so now we're talking about getting out of a deal. What is the exit strategy for investors?
Um, I guess it kind of depends. You mean like on seller finance or just in general, like
Just
some
in a real
exit
estate
strategy?
deal in general, like
Yeah.
what are some of the great ways to get out of a deal, but also
Yeah.
make some good money?
Yeah. So kind of depends on what your goals are. We do a whole bunch of things. So like we flipped properties, which obviously is short term and you're paying capital gains tax, but you're making big chunks of money. I think that's appropriate if you're looking to pay off debts and it's your income. So like for me, my flipping businesses are like my income. That's like my everyday paychecks. Um, I think long-term rentals is where it's at. If you're looking to grow wealth, you need to hold something for at least 7 to 10 years. I can tell you the rental properties we bought 7 to 10 years ago, we just started cashing in on those. So we'll sell them or we'll refinance them and pull chunks of equity out. And then we take that money and we private lend it. So our money is still making us money. It's not like we're just cashing in and then going and buying a huge house or a new truck or whatever the case may be. You have to be like, you have to be financially smart and educated with your money. But I tell people if you're going to hold rentals like 2 units, 3 units, little stuff like that, or singles, just hang on. It's a rough ride, but hang on for 7 to 10 years and you're going to see it all come to fruition because everything, the market cycles and cycles and cycles. So you're going to build up a lot of equity in those houses. And then the multifamily syndication is obviously a longer term play, but we invest passively in those and we also purchase them and invest as general partners. And that's like a 7 to 10 year play, but you're talking bigger buildings with bigger cash flow and bigger equity buildup in the project. Yeah. So I'm not a huge proponent of, I feel like every investor has their favorite buildings. Like I have my favorite buildings that are real small. They're like 8 units, 6 units, but they're my favorite. I'll never sell them. I'll never sell them. But I have some single family homes that I've been selling over the past 2 to 3 years because the market's been crazy. I've had them for 7 to 10 years and people are desperately looking for single family homes. Inventory is really low. So it was a great time in the market for me to sell them. If you would have asked me 6 years ago, are you going to sell your single family homes? I would have said, no, I'm going to hang on to them forever. But fast forward a few years and the market's crazy and there's no inventory. So I'm like, oh, let's sell the single families. They don't make as much money and keep the favorite multifamilies.
Oh wow! So you become like I'm not going to sell that properties. You become attached to certain properties at some point.
Certain ones cash flow really well and are real low maintenance and they're in really good areas. And I think they'll be like forever properties. Those will be the ones that are just like funding my retirement. I'll be living off those when I'm 60, 70 years old.
I love it. I know you have a YouTube channel because you kind of mentioned it a little bit. Plug that in. Give us the plug on that YouTube channel and those social media platforms that you're on.
Sure. My YouTube channel is April Crossley, or if you Google Lazy Girl Real Estate Investing, it will probably come up as well. And we talk a lot about just like newbie real estate investing and private money lending on that channel. And then my Instagram is April Crossley and Facebook is Lazy Girl Real Estate Investing.
Awesome. Thank you, April, for joining us. It's been
Yeah, thank you for having me. I appreciate it.
Alrighty, next IBS.